Thank you. So as the day goes on through lunch and later, don't stop those conversations. You're probably having great conversations about kids that you wonder about, or maybe kids that you know about, but all in the spirit of getting to know these kids better. So let me show you just quickly a couple other examples of these overarching practices and things we saw happening in these schools. I should mention regarding Amanda's documentary, she did this as part of her, I think, her sophomore class project, entered it into a film festival in the Mobile area, and won the grand prize as a 16-year-old kid of this film festival for documentaries. And she did this one all herself. Just was done last spring. You can find this one on the web. Any of these videos, by the way, you can also on the back page of your workbook they're almost all YouTube videos, and a couple you can access other ways. So there's a list of the links on the back if you want to see these. Okay, let's talk about absenteeism. Now, Mark Cotillo, recently in an Ed Week article, spoke these words: an overwhelming majority of chronically absent kids are impoverished. So the first question is, do you know? When you look at your attendance data, do you disaggregate it to the point that you know which kids are missing what, how frequently, are there patterns, have there been interventions put in place to try to get these kids here more? Do you know, are there issues related to their age? What do you know about your kids that are missing? Do you have a definition for chronic absenteeism? How many days does a kid miss before somebody's after them or going out to see what's going on? All those kinds of things. We found a relentless passion in these schools we studied to get every kid there every day. And if a kid missed one day, somebody was either going to or contacting the home to figure out why. If tardiness was an issue, they dealt with that. Most of them virtually eliminated tardies in their schools. And they did that with adults, just adult presence and kind of setting a standard that we don't allow it. It's not something that we can have going on, and the kids rose to that expectation. Those kinds of things were going on. So let me give you an example. There's a young boy by the name of Javon. It's a real kid in a real school. Javon's in the 5th grade. Javon missed some school. Javon missed a day the first week, the second week, the third. He was here the 4th week, missed a couple the 5th week. So this is an example of using their data and asking questions. At the end of the year, Javon had missed his attendance looked about like that. He was here about 80% of the time. Some places we'll go, we'll have folks say, God, I wish I could get this number of kids here 80% of the time. We got way worse challenges than that. But nonetheless, Javon is behind in the 5th grade 2 years in his reading. He's reading at a 3rd grade level. He's missing roughly a day a week. Now, if you aggregate that, Javon's missed 2 months of school. Are you going to catch Javon up this year? If you're his 5th grade teacher, he's missing 2 months of school, and he's behind 2 grade levels in reading. Or if he's an 11th grader, or if he's a middle school student and he's missing this much school, well, we know that it will be probably nothing short of miraculous if the same pattern continues and Javon just suddenly catches up. What it requires is action. What it requires is concerted action, often collaborative action, that often starts with somebody asking a question. What are we doing with Javon? He seems to be missing a lot of school. What do we do? What's the data tell us about Javon? Javon also lives in poverty. What do we know about Javon's reasons why he's missing school? All of that comes into play when these schools and when you take deeper looks at trying to get to know your kids. And as a part of that, we know the power of relationships is palpable. You know that, we know that. But it's more than just the words of it all begins with relationships, or relationships are important. Relational trust and relationships, they chose to use the terms relational trust. That's kind of the backbone of a relationship. If I like you, what's your name? Ben? Should I like Ben? Does anybody know Ben? 4 people said don't like you, but I'm going to like you anyway, Ben. So if I like Ben and Ben likes me, we've got relational trust with each other. We trust each other. We've built that. And we don't build it because one of us tells the other one, you got to trust me. It's out of action. It's out of behavior. Well, this study that took place, it's still considered a landmark study in terms of trying to understand relational trust. It took place in the Chicago Public Schools quite a while ago, about 10 years ago. It was done by Tony Brick and Barbara Schneider, 2 scholars looking at Chicago Public Schools. And they looked at, before I show you this one, they looked at thousands of kids, thousands of relationships, hundreds of schools throughout the Chicago public school system. And they first developed a definition of what was that relational trust. Why would Ben and I find out that we could like each other, have a relationship in terms of trusting each other, and so on? Well, one of them has to do with mutual respect. Respecting each other for who we are and what we do and what we say we do. Mutual respect is always there. So is competence. Now, we didn't think, that was new to us in terms of how would competence come into Ben and I developing a trusting relationship. Well, what we learned and what they learned in this study was that when incompetence in schools is allowed to continue, it erodes trust. It erodes trust. And what did they mean? Well, what they meant by that was if there are, say, 4 teachers at a grade level, and 3 of them have great performance of their kids, and one doesn't, one does a flat line year after year after year, what that will do over time is erode trust among that group of teachers. Because for whatever reason, one teacher is not able to do the job, for whatever reason. And if it's ignored or not dealt with, that will erode trust among adults. So competence is an important part of trust. You think of the trusting relationships you have, probably you can wade into this area of competence and think, yeah, it's counting on somebody to do what they say they're going to do and to be somewhat competent at it. The third area is personal regard. We care about each other. We hold each other in high regard. Sometimes we like this person, and we like who they are and what they represent. And finally, integrity. We can count on this person to do what they say. We can count on them to act in a certain way that's going to show integrity. Well, those are all reasons that Ben and I might, as we got to know each other, characterize as, do we have relational trust? Sure we do. And it's because of feeling good about these categories. So in the schools where they did thousands of interviews and focus groups and observations and videotaping of interactions of folks, what they found, and this is the groups that they looked at what exists in terms of relational trust. They were in 400 Chicago schools, between teachers and students, teachers with other teachers, teachers with parents, and all these groups with school administrators. What did we find? What did we learn from studying? Does relational trust make a difference? And here's what they found. First, they had to say, make a difference for what? Just how we feel? No. They wanted to know if improvement in school was in any way related to the relational trust that existed between people. All of this could be said way more easily just by saying, do you trust who you work with? Are these characteristics of trust present? Do you trust who you work with? Do you like who you work with? And here's what they found in terms of caring relationships and in terms of school improvement. Where the strongest levels of relational trust existed in all those groups they studied, that school or that grade band or whatever that grouping was had a 1 in 2 chance of making significant improvement in student achievement. Meaning, it doesn't mean student achievement can't happen, but if you've got trusting relationships where people are working together, trusting each other, where you've got those relationships with your kids or between you as staff, with your administrators, you got a 1 in 2 chance at least of getting better, a significant improvement. But if you don't have trust, and this is really where the kind of the gist of the study comes out, if you don't have trusting relationships, meaning, and we all have been in those, and maybe you've been in them in schools that you've been employed in, where you don't really have a good relationship with the administrator or some of your colleagues or some of the support people around you. If that's the case, the weakest levels of trust, you have a 1 in 7 chance of making significant improvement. 1 in 7. So what's the bottom line, the gist of the story? We have to work on building trust with kids. We have to work on it among ourselves as adults. We have to talk about it if it doesn't exist. And if it does exist, we have to talk about how to improve it. We've got to work better together. It's going to take all of us to make significant improvements. We can do it. The work can be done, but it's going to take all of us. So the notion of trust and relationships isn't important, critically important. When John Hattie studied student-teacher relationships, he assigned them an effect size of 0.72. Well, who's John Hattie? John Hattie is a researcher from New Zealand. John Hattie is an empirical scholar. He studies studies. He does meta-analyses of studies. So in other words, if you want to know about homework, Hattie has studied thousands of studies of homework to try to determine what do we know about homework. And then he's looked at the effectiveness these studies point to in terms of if you do this, this will happen. He's assigned effect sizes. The effect sizes are decimals, like this one, 0.72. Hattie believes that an effect size of 0.40, which means about half of the time, a little less than that this phenomena has been studied, it worked, and it made sense, and it helped kids in terms of student achievement and instructional practice. Student-teacher relationships, 0.72. That's way up there. This is where some people get the notion of all you got to do is really have a great relationship with your kids, and you'll be amazed at how their achievement grows, regardless of how much you change your practice. Now, we know that changing practice is also important in improving practice, but the relationships may well be the most powerful factor in terms of doing what you guys think you want to do. So if you look at the next page in your workbook, we're going to bring this all together and talk about strategies a little bit now. You'll see this graphic, which is kind of a weave here, interwoven practices. So, we've just talked about using data, we've talked about asking questions, and we've talked about building relationships. And if you weave into those 3 intentional areas of effort that these schools did, those 3 action areas that were on the framework on the preceding page, kind of the big 3 things that happen in these schools: Safe and supportive environments, focusing on learning and building leadership capacity. This is what happens in these schools. So if you take this page and go back to your own school, your own grade level team meeting, your own department meeting, your own middle level team meeting, whatever, and ask the question, how are we doing? How are we weaving these things together in our school? Do we all feel good about it? Do we all agree that these things are happening? And if not, what do we need to talk about? That's the step or the start that a lot of the schools we've worked with take in terms of where do we start? What do we do first? Start with asking those questions. How are we doing in all of these? And how is our student achievement displaying in our school? How many kids are not where they need to be? So in terms of these, again, 3 action areas, what we're going to do now, the rest of the morning, as well as this afternoon sessions, we're going to focus on strategies. So turn one more page in your notebook, in your workbook, and you'll see 16 strategies. And those 16 strategies break out under the 3 action areas. So again, this is big picture, but these are the things, the practices, the strategies we saw happen in these schools that drove their improvement, that drove their gains, and sustained those gains. And today, we're going to focus the rest of the day mostly on the environment, creating healthy, safe, and supportive environments, and the strategies that fall under those areas. So quickly, you can see it on your page of 16, but these are the 6 strategies. Eliminating blame, establishing a safe environment, developing an accurate understanding of poverty, leveling the playing field, using structures and processes that promote relationships, there's an S on there, and engaging parents and families as partners. Those are the 6 primary strategies we saw happen in these schools. Now you notice we aren't talking about instruction yet. That's the second area of strategy, of action that also happened in these schools. So right now, we're going to focus on eliminating blame, developing an accurate understanding of poverty, and we'll say a word or two about safety. And we're going to start with, remember I mentioned earlier, some of these schools said they wanted to tell us right away what they had to stop doing. Tammy's going to talk to you about this area, confronting eliminating blame.
So in my real life or my other life outside of teaching, I am a Baptist preacher's wife. Have any of you ever been to an African American Baptist church? Somebody said, "Oh Lord," or "Yes Lord." Okay. I'm getting ready to get a little concerned. Okay, so if you've never been, have you ever seen T.D. Jakes on television? Okay, he's my cousin. Not for real, I'm just kidding. But I said all of that to say that in the Baptist church there has to be some conversation, right? So that means you're going to talk back to me. If you get real excited about it, you can say amen. Practice. Okay, I was just kidding. All right. How about preach it? Okay, so that's really a good jumping off point, because working with children who live in poverty, working with families that live in poverty really is hard work. It has to start from the heart, and it's really difficult work. It's difficult work. And so I'd like for you to ask yourself this question: have we eliminated in our schools blame? And have we confronted it? So I saw a little bit, how many of you are middle school teachers? Could we just give them a round of applause? I'm just saying, middle school teachers, I bow to you, in kindergarten teachers. I do. I used to have a daughter that I really liked, and then she went to middle school. I was just like, who is this? I mean, she was just like a really sweet little girl. And so I just thought that maybe it was just her. And then 4 years later, I had a son that went to middle school. Guess what? I didn't like him either. And so then there was hope. There was really going to be some hope for the third one. My baby boy. I still don't like him. He's 26 years old. No, I'm just... Okay. So what I'd like for you to do is channel your inner middle school self. You know how you were. All right, and in your inner middle school self, you're going to turn to somebody and just say to them, you know who's to blame for poverty, and then just finish the sentence. Okay? Ready? You have your inner school, middle school self. You have your inner school, middle school self. You have your inner school, middle school self. Stand up with real attitude and say who is to blame for poverty. Ready? Stand up. You only have 2 seconds. All right, ready, go. Well, I might. You ready? Okay. I have an inner middle school person who's going to tell us who the blame is for poverty. She has emotions and everything. It is not my fault. Anybody else? Whose fault is poverty?
Parents! No. I disagree. I think it's the government. We have made everybody want a handout instead of going to work.
Okay. That's what she said. It's the government's fault. She's going all the way back to that video. It's the parents' fault. It's the government's fault. Whose fault is it? Whose fault is poverty? Everybody who cares? My parents' boss? Who else's fault is poverty? Can I suggest that it's everybody's fault? I'm just going to throw it out there right now, and we can talk about it later on. But once we think about it, have we eliminated, have we decided that we need to confront it? What does confront mean? We need to face it head on. Just like those middle school children who don't really like, you too much. You don't like them too much. You just have to confront it. And once you confront it, then you can start dealing with it. So I apologize from the beginning if I offend you, but the Bible says the poor will be among us always. But is that an excuse? Not to work with our children who live in poverty. So we talk about it's the mother's fault, it's the brother's fault, it's the sister's fault. Okay, it's everybody's fault and now we have it, right? So we need to confront it. We cannot eliminate poverty, but we certainly can eliminate the blame. I used to work in a school where, I don't know, it might not be important here, but football is really important in Alabama. I don't think it's important in Oklahoma at all. I'm just talking about Alabama. And I have 4th grade students come to class and tell me I cannot get my homework done because. You know what the because was? Because I had football practice. I have baseball practice. I saw a wrestling coach. I have wrestling practice. And was my response, and? Who is to blame for when we don't do what we do? So we have to confront it. We have to confront it. This is hard work. So now I just want you to ask yourself this question. Who have I blamed for this? And so let's confront it. Now we confront it, and let's eliminate not poverty, but what? The blame. All right, so why does blame happen? And how can we eliminate it? So that was just a 3-minute discussion. So now why does it happen? And how can we eliminate it? Turn and talk to somebody, and you know when you get finished with your 3-minute talk, you will have the answers to the problems. Ready, go. Why does blame happen? Anybody on this side? Somebody needs to be held accountable. Oh. Held accountable, but not us. All right? In the middle section. Yes, ma'am.
To divert direction somewhere else.
Oh, you know what? If you were at my school, we would give you like a snap, 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 snap. Okay? All right, over here. It's easy. Lack of control, lack of control. Okay, what's the answer? I'm gonna start over here. You gave me why does blame happen? How can we eliminate the blame?
Can't.
Somebody said we can't.
Can't.
Yes, sir.
Can't.
We can eliminate blame by taking responsibility for our own actions.
That's easy said, but you can't. Humans are naturally lazy. They're not going to do anything if they can get out of doing something. They're going to do it. Blaming somebody else for their misgivings as part of that, they're going to do that.
Okay, he said that humans are naturally lazy, and what was that was the part I heard, and then you went down because everybody was like, oh, I got to say something. I want to say something. Wait, hold on just a second. Okay, yes.
Humans are naturally lazy. That's been proven. Humans are naturally lazy. And if we can get out of doing something, we're going to do it. And if getting us out of doing something means it's his fault, then we're going to use that. Now, does everybody do that? No. Is it different levels? Yes. Some people are here, some people are here. And
Okay, I'm so glad you said, does everybody do it? Because my friend, you're my new cousin. The rest of my cousins were ready to just like, they were ready to get on you. But my other cousin back here, what did you say if I did what?
I said blame can be eliminated by taking responsibility for your own actions.
So even if I'm lazy, if I did what? Took responsibility in my laziness for my own actions, it could possibly be. And so you know what I find sometimes in education is that we do want to blame, I mean, you're not in Oklahoma, but like in Alabama, where I live, and not in Illinois, where I'm from. So, high school teachers, I'm not talking about you, I'm just talking about what I'm talking about. Like a high school math teacher is like, what in the world did they learn in middle school? And the middle school is like, what in the world did they learn in that elementary school because they babied them so much? And then the kindergarten teacher, what do parents do? Why didn't they take them to daycare? Talk to them, do something with them. And you know, and who do the parents blame?
Amen, sister.
The daddy. It's the daddy's fault. It's the daddy's fault. You know, they're your child when they do well, and then they're their daddy's child when they come from the daddy's side of the family. So these are some possible reasons. Some possible reasons, not the only ones, but somebody said this, the fear of looking incompetent. I didn't get to move that child on because they came to me 2 or 3 grades behind. Frustration. I've tried every single thing to meet Cornelius. He was my little child that came to me, and he was in 4th grade. He couldn't read cursive writing. He also could not do basic math. But then I read his record and realized the reason he couldn't do any of those things that in his previous school, because his teacher was so frustrated with him every single day, he went and worked with the custodian. Every single day. And so I told Cornelius that he couldn't get outside of my class because there was nothing he was going to learn about Alabama history working with the custodian. So he had to stay with me because I had some expectations for him when he left. But the other teacher was frustrated. She was just tired, and she just kind of gave up. Othering is somebody else's problem. And finally, stereotypes. If we really had some time to talk about that, because there are some stereotypes for people who live in poverty. And I think actually we might get to that this afternoon. So those are some possible reasons, along with your reasons. So what is an antidote for blame? How can we move forward? First of all, we need to confront it, which for me means I need to acknowledge that I do blame people for some things. And then what can I do? I need to kind of build my own self-efficacy. I need to work on what can I do to work with children who live in poverty, different than what I've been doing. How about building relationships with people who live in poverty? I can personally tell you how to work with children who live in poverty. Why? because I am a product of poverty. The very essence of who I am, is Genevieve Brown and Ronald Range's child who grew up at 1405 Fairmount Avenue on the hill in Joliet, Illinois, which is a project. I can tell you because I know what it means, but I also can tell you that you don't have to stay there. You need to educate yourself about poverty and also challenge your mental map as it relates to poverty. What does it look like? What do I really believe about children who live in poverty? Are they destined to stay there? Are they there because their parents are lazy? Are they there because everybody wants to have a handout? Why are they living in poverty? In my situation, it wasn't that at all. I really grew up in a two-parent family for just a little while, and then things didn't quite work out with my parents. And so my mother had to make a choice. Did she stay in the situation and continue to get beat? Or did she take her 5 children to a place of safety? She chose the latter. But when she took us from a 2-parent home, we ended up living in the worst projects ever, which changed my life. And I don't say that it changed it for a horrible, because I don't think if I had gone through those experiences, I would be where I am today. So challenge your mental map. Some people are in poverty just because, in Genevieve's case, she wanted to survive and she wanted something different for her children.
Thank you, Tammy. Tammy is a pretty unique person. And I'm going to give you a whole lot more of Tammy this afternoon, you elementary teachers, so brace yourselves for that. You got 3 hours of Tammy coming up. But Tammy makes some points about blame that are at the heart of what we saw happen in these schools that dramatically changed. Did all the teachers in these schools and the adults suddenly have the same attitudes and the same beliefs and the same perspectives? No, no more than anyone here does. But what happened in these schools was that they agreed on establishing, for the sake of their kids first. You know, we often heard the phrase, and it bothers some people, but other people applaud. We often heard the phrase, this school has got to be about the needs of the kids as opposed to the wants of the adults. And that can be a brutal fact, but it can be a difficult discussion or series of discussions. But if you truly put the needs of the kids first and the wants of the adults second, you will establish safe environments. Safe, it doesn't mean you don't pay attention to what adults need and want, but there's a pecking order. That's what we were told in these schools. Their mission was to establish a physically safe and emotionally safe environment for every kid in the school. And we never sacrificed that for an excuse or for blame. This is how these schools eradicated blame. And they all told us we had to stop the practice of adults blaming kids and blaming families for what the kids aren't doing. We had to stop that being allowed as discourse in our buildings. Some of the schools, one of the schools told us when we asked, how did you do it? They said, we created a no-blame zone. We as adults in our school literally agreed together that we were not going to blame families or the kids for what they weren't doing. We were going to put every bit of that energy into trying to better meet the needs of those kids, figure out what they were, and if this didn't work, we would go to this. And if this didn't work, we'd go back to the drawing board. The bottom line is, the more kids' needs got met, guess what happened to achievement? Guess what happened to attendance? Guess what happened to behavior challenges? It's not like magic or a different language or some complex formula. That's what these schools did. The third strategy we're going to touch on before we break for lunch is something Tammy just talked a lot about, and that was the importance of developing an accurate understanding of poverty. Now, you all teach in a district where 70% of the kids live in poverty that characterize this town, this community, this area. So you all have a lot of experience. Probably a number of you, like Tammy, grew up in poverty. Probably a lot of you have firsthand experience with families, with folks close to you that live in and out of poverty, or perhaps in poverty. You've got knowledge. It's not like you have to learn a new language. But what we found in these schools, and we heard it again and again, where the educators told us just because we teach in a school that enrolls a lot of kids that live in poverty doesn't mean I really understood it. I had to learn about it. I had to study it. I had to expose myself and open myself to learning more about what is it to live in poverty. What is it like? What does that involve? So if you'll turn your workbooks open, and I don't know the page number, but we got to be up to about page 5 now. 5. Pull that workbook open, and you'll see something like is what's on the screen here. You're going to need a pen or a pencil here, and this is not a group activity. This is your own, just for yourself. We're going to take a few moments, and we're going to use a 100-word reflection as the tool here. It's one we use with groups all over and have. It's a practice that we actually observed and learned about in the United Kingdom, in London, visiting high-performing, high-poverty schools there. So this 100-word reflection, what we want you to do is you can see what it says at the top. Why does poverty exist? So write on your page, not with anybody else, write on your page why you think poverty exists. No more than 100 words. You may be able to answer it in 28 words. Take 3 minutes now and write your reflection. Why does poverty exist? Your own personal reflection. Okay, as you're finishing up your 100-word reflections, I'll tell you what we're going to do with these. We're going to ask you to bring these to the afternoon sessions. We're going to talk about these there. We'd also really encourage you, when you take your lunch break, if you go out with colleagues and you want to share any of these or thoughts about these, do that while we've got a break coming up. We're going to take the last 20 minutes now and touch on several issues related to developing an accurate understanding of poverty that we saw happen in these schools. So one of them has to do with your kids, and we're going to ask you to watch this quick little 3-minute video about kids and thinking about, are these your kids? So Jennifer, you could start this. Thank you.
Students have recently lost their homes. How many of you in the last few weeks have gone to bed hungry? At Castleberry School, students whose families are at the poverty level or slightly above qualify for the free lunch program. We talked with some of those kids with their parents' permission. Who can tell me what it's like to feel hungry?
It's like hard, you can't sleep, you just like wait, you just go to sleep for like 5 minutes and you wake up again and your like stomach hurts and you're thinking, I can't sleep, I'm going to try and sleep, I'm going to try and sleep, but you can't because like your stomach's hurting and it's because it doesn't have any food in it. And it's like a black hole. And sometimes when I don't eat, my stomach, you can hear like it's like growling, you can hear it.
Usually we eat macaroni or we drink water or tea. My mom will sometimes like make food and then she won't have enough, so at night we'll just eat cereal or something. Other times my parents will fight about money because they don't have enough money to pay the food.
We have to sometimes take food from a church. It's hard because my grandmother's also out of work and we usually get some food from her.
It's kind of embarrassing because the next day you go to school asking kids if they want this or if they want that. If they have cereal and they haven't opened it yet, you go ask them if they want their cereal.
We found a lot of families are making a choice between food and electricity. How many of you have had the lights turned off at your house? How do you study when you don't have the lights on at home?
We have emergency flashlights, and I usually have to use them. I'll just light candles and sit around in a circle of candles.
Candles. Yes, ma'am?
I use candles because my mommy brings some.
I'll go out to the car and turn on the overhead and read out there and study.
Ashley Ray raised her hand to add something that we didn't expect.
I kind of feel like it's my fault that we don't have enough money. I feel like it's my fault that they have to pay for me and the clothes that they buy for me.
Okay, we're gonna broach these this afternoon as well, but I'm gonna close now with just a couple key points of developing a deeper understanding of poverty that we saw happen in these schools. One was the acknowledgement and recognition of stereotypes. And as Tammy talked about this a little bit when she was talking about blame, this is one that we found in all the schools they had to take on. And that is, are stereotypes about people that live in poverty alive and well in our school? And can we talk about them? Can we talk about different perspectives? I'm just going to speak to one because it kind of came up this morning. People in poverty are unmotivated and have weak work ethics. If I were to ask this group, tell me what you hear out there on the street about people that live in poverty, almost any group, anywhere we go, hundreds of people, thousands of people, one of the first responses that happened today was they're lazy. People in poverty are lazy. Well, when we dig into that, and part of what we've done in our study is start to try to look at what do we really know about some of these conditions or some of these, stereotypes that exist out there about people that live in poverty. Unmotivated and have weak work ethics. Well, when you look at if you take all the people that qualify for assistance and that live in poverty, qualifying them for assistance if they choose to seek it, and you take out kids, and you take out the elderly, and you take out the handicapped, the rest of that population of people work on average 1.7 jobs. Why do they work 1.7 jobs? We all know the answer to that. To try to make ends meet. It's what we and scholars call the working poor phenomena in this country. That we are not able to make ends meet at minimum wage in this country. There is I don't know about Ponca City, but in any of the metropolitan areas in this country, if you are an adult in a household of two, maybe you're a two-people family and a household of 4 kids, working at minimum wage, you cannot afford a 2-bedroom apartment in any metropolitan community in this country today because of what minimum wage will buy you. So that's only those that are working at minimum wage and have one stream of income. We know that it takes more. It's why 2 and 3 jobs is not unusual. So this notion that everybody in poverty is unmotivated, and if you live in poverty, you're lazy, and that you have a poor work ethic, is that fact or is that a myth? Is that a stereotype or is that somebody's recognition of some people they've known would fall into that? Those are the difficult conversations that come with developing deeper understandings of poverty around what we know as realities or information that we can trust. The other area besides stereotypes is mental maps. We've all got them. It's how we view the world. I've got one, Tammy's got one, Ben's got one, Chris has got one. It's how we base our actions. We kind of have our minds set around our mental map. They generally are tacit until we examine them, meaning we don't talk about them too much. We know that they shape our attitudes and behavior. This is something we saw happen in these schools, where people felt okay. It's okay to talk about our mental map that sometimes gets into stereotypes or a lack of understanding. This notion of seeking to understand became commonplace in the schools we studied. If you believe this and I believe that, can we have a conversation about it to try to understand and better inform where our opinions and mental maps came from? So mental maps, we know, can be identified through inquiry and reflection. We know that we can come to compromise. We can become better informed. We can maybe change some of the decision-making we're doing with kids. Sometimes it's related to being able to talk about our mental maps. It's another area of working with developing deeper understandings of poverty that the schools said they did as adults, is they talked about this stuff. We know that changing the mindset of one teacher can change the social experience of that child's entire world. Stanford researchers recently have studied middle school math, and they found in high poverty schools, and they found that if a kid has a relationship with one teacher, doesn't have to be the math teacher, one teacher, it can change that entire experience the kid has in school and improve math. But we can know if the kid's having relationships. Those are things we can know as adults. Do we know it? Do we keep data? Do we try to interact with the kids as kids and as kids with needs? Do we take those steps, or are we spending time focusing on other priorities? These schools took the kids' steps first. They challenged mental maps oftentimes, and they learned that behavior often came before beliefs, meaning we as people have to see something working sometimes before we're ready to accept the fact that there is a different way to do something. But that happened a lot in these schools. So to conclude the morning, and before we go into the remainder of the strategies this afternoon, we're going to just touch on a couple things. In these schools, this is what we saw happen: leading teaching through a lens on poverty. We saw folks act with a sense of urgency, meaning if they didn't feel good about where they were, they did something about it. They made it urgent. They made it important. They didn't do this. They didn't bury their heads and say, well, that's the way it is. This is the hand we're dealt. And they didn't accept that, and dramatic change came from that. We know that every school can overcome the debilitating effects of poverty. Every school could. We know that the demographics of your kids don't equate to their destiny. We know that. And we know that we must combat hopelessness in every child. If you've got kids in your schools, as you probably do, that have lost hope or maybe never had hope for whatever reason, we know we can instill in every child the self-confidence that they can achieve and succeed in school and life. And we're going to close with a video that actually took place in the state south of you, Texas. And it was from a school district called the Community School District. And it's something that district did in terms of instilling hope and having all of their staff, through deeply understanding their kids, practice hope with their kids. So if you could start this, Jennifer, we'll conclude with this video.
They asked us
picked you, and I chose you.
And I chose you.
I chose you because every day you have an infectious smile and you always have the greatest attitude.
I knew that you were my student. You were the reason that I come to work every day, every single day. Because you're so passionate, it just brightens my day every day to know that I get to see you. And I picked you because I wanted to tell you how much you inspire me every day. Every day you smile, and you make me so happy.
Thank you.
You inspire me to be better, and you're very special to me. You're at the thing of the students that we believe in. And Dakota, what I believe about you is that you are amazing, that you have overcome some hard things in your life, and you overcome them with a smile. I choose you. I love you to death. I've loved having you in class all last year.
She wanted us to pick someone who we believe in and why we come to work every day, because it's not for the money. And I chose you.
So very proud of the direction that you're going in, and I just think that you have endless possibilities ahead of you. Our whole class looks to you to make us laugh every single day. And I just wanted to let you know that I believe in you. You can do anything you put your mind to, and you have a bright future ahead of you, so I chose you.
I believe in you. I love you. I think you guys are the best thing ever. So I want you to know that I believe in you.
I believe in me.
I believe in myself. I believe in myself. I believe in myself. I believe in myself. I believe in myself.
I believe in myself.